The discovery of the Americas in the late 15th century was a seismic event, not just geographically, but economically. It was like unearthing a treasure chest overflowing with gold, silver, and resources Europe had never seen. Spain, in particular, became engorged with wealth from its American colonies. Ship after ship, laden with silver from the mines of Potosi, sailed back across the Atlantic, flooding the Spanish economy. This influx of wealth wasn't just a Spanish phenomenon. It rippled across Europe, inflating economies and creating new opportunities. Trade routes, once confined to the Mediterranean and the East, exploded outwards. Merchants, their eyes gleaming with the promise of profit, set sail for the new world, eager to exploit its riches. This newfound wealth wasn't without its consequences. Inflation soared, traditional economic structures creaked under the strain, and a new class of merchants and entrepreneurs began to emerge, challenging the established order. The Americas, once a distant myth, had reshaped the economic landscape of Europe, setting the stage for the rise of the bourgeoisie. For centuries, economic activity in Europe had been dominated by guilds. These powerful organizations controlled the production and sale of goods, limiting competition and innovation. But the influx of wealth from the Americas created cracks in this system. The guilds, with their rigid rules and hierarchies, struggled to adapt to the rapid changes in the market. Into this gap stepped a new breed of economic actors, the bourgeoisie. These were merchants, traders, and entrepreneurs, driven by a hunger for profit and a willingness to embrace new ideas. Unlike the guilds, they were not bound by tradition. They saw in the burgeoning Atlantic trade a chance to amass fortunes. The bourgeoisie were not content with simply trading in exotic goods. They began to invest their newfound wealth in manufacturing, financing new technologies and production methods. They built factories, hired workers, and organized production on a scale never seen before. The seeds of the Industrial Revolution were being sown. The rise of the bourgeoisie did not go unchallenged. The nobility, long accustomed to their privileged position, viewed this new class with suspicion and disdain. They saw the bourgeoisie's wealth not as a sign of progress, but as a threat to their own power and status. The bourgeoisie, for their part, chafed under the restrictions imposed by the old order. They resented the privileges of the nobility and demanded a greater say in how society was run. They believed that their wealth, earned through hard work and innovation, should translate into political power. The stage was set for a clash between the old and the new, between the landed aristocracy and the rising capitalist class. The struggle would not be confined to the halls of power. It would be waged in the streets, in the factories, and in the very heart of European society. In their struggle against the nobility, the bourgeoisie found an unlikely ally, the monarchy. Kings and queens across Europe, eager to consolidate their own power and break the stranglehold of the old aristocracy, saw in the bourgeoisie a useful tool. The bourgeoisie, with their growing wealth, could provide the financial muscle that the monarchs needed to fund their armies and expand their territories. This alliance was a marriage of convenience, but it proved to be a potent force. In England, the Glorious Revolution of 1688 saw the bourgeoisie, in alliance with Parliament, curtail the power of the monarchy and establish a constitutional monarchy. In France, the French Revolution, though far more violent and chaotic, ultimately swept away the old feudal order and paved the way for the rise of a bourgeois republic. The bourgeoisie had played a key role in dismantling the old order, but their victory was not yet complete. They had won political power, but the struggle for economic dominance was far from over. Section 5. The Engine of Industry. The 18th century witnessed the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, a period of unprecedented technological innovation and economic transformation. At the heart of this revolution was the bourgeoisie, who, armed with capital and a hunger for profits, financed the development of new technologies and industries. They poured their wealth into factories, mines, and railroads, creating a complex web of production and distribution that spanned the globe. They embraced new technologies like the steam engine and the power loom, which dramatically increased productivity and fueled economic growth. The Industrial Revolution transformed Europe from an agrarian society into an industrial powerhouse. Cities swelled with workers seeking employment in the new factories. The pace of life accelerated and the world seemed to be changing at a dizzying speed. The bourgeoisie, the architects of this new world, were at the pinnacle of their power. Section 6. The shadow of the factory. The Industrial Revolution, while a testament to human ingenuity, cast a long shadow. The workers who toiled in the factories, mines and mills endured harsh conditions and meager wages. They worked long hours in dangerous and unhealthy environments, their lives dominated by the relentless rhythm of the machines. Child labor was commonplace, with children as young as 6 working long hours for a pittance. Living conditions in the rapidly expanding industrial cities were appalling. Overcrowded slums, rife with disease and crime, became breeding grounds for social unrest. The bourgeoisie, while reaping the rewards of this new industrial order, seemed indifferent to the plight of the working class. They argued that the free market, left to its own devices, would eventually lift everyone out of poverty. But for their millions trapped in the misery of the factories and slums, such promises rang hollow. Section 7. A spectre is haunting Europe. The exploitation of the working class did not go unnoticed or unchallenged. Across Europe, workers began to organize, forming trade unions and political parties to fight for their rights. They demanded better wages, safer working conditions, and a share of the wealth they were creating. The ideas of Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, articulated in the Communist Manifesto, resonated with the growing working class. Marxism offered a searing critique of capitalism, arguing that it was inherently exploitative and that the only solution was a revolution that would overthrow the bourgeoisie and create a classless society. A spectre is haunting Europe, Marx and Engels famously wrote, the spectre of communism. The spectre of revolution was indeed on the march, fueled by the injustices of the industrial age and the growing anger of the working class. Section 8. The hammer and sickle. The Russian Revolution of 1917 marked a turning point in world history. The Bolsheviks, led by Vladimir Lenin, seized power, promising to create a socialist state based on the principles of Marxism-Leninism. The Bolsheviks saw themselves as the vanguard of the proletariat, the working class, and their victory sent shockwaves across the world. It was a direct challenge to the existing world order, dominated by capitalist powers like Great Britain, France, and the United States. The Russian Civil War, which followed the Bolshevik Revolution, was a brutal conflict pitting the Red Army of the Bolsheviks against a coalition of white forces. The Bolsheviks emerged victorious, and in 1922 the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, or USSR, was formed. Section 9. A New World Order. The establishment of the USSR marked a significant shift in the global balance of power. For the first time, a major power had embraced communism, challenging the hegemony of capitalism. The Cold War, a decades-long ideological struggle between the capitalist West and the communist East, had begun. The bourgeoisie, once the revolutionary class that had challenged the old feudal order, now found themselves on the defensive. They were now the target of revolutionary movements inspired by the success of the Bolshevik. The rise of the bourgeoisie, from their origins as merchants and traders in the age of exploration to their dominance during the Industrial Revolution, is a complex and multifaceted story. It is a story of innovation, ambition, and the relentless pursuit of profit, but also of exploitation, inequality, and social unrest. The legacy of the bourgeoisie and their impact on the course of human history continues to be debated and discussed to this day.